Small Spaces, written by Catherine Arden and published by Penguin Press. Welcome back, warrior friends. When we left off in chapter 4, Oli had finally gotten dressed for school and she was heading downstairs to eat breakfast with her dad. Let's pick up from there. Oli didn't make a lot of noise in her socks, but when she stepped into the kitchen, her dad turned around right away. In some ways, he hadn't changed since the last year. He told jokes and knitted socks, just like he always had. But his thick, dark hair had silver threads that hadn't been there before, and sometimes Oli would catch him staring blankly into space when he thought that she wasn't looking. "Look at your dad's eyes," her mom said once, while all three of them were paddling down the Connecticut River. Oli was sitting in the middle of the canoe, and her dad was behind her at the stern. From the bow, Oli's mother looked back and smiled. Her nose was sunburnt red. "Aren't your dad's eyes the loveliest in the whole world?" They were big and velvety. They were so dark that you couldn't see where the color part ended and the pupils began. "You have eyes just the same as his, Oli, my heartbreaker." Oli's dad smiled, and he laughed and said, "You got my eyes maybe, Oli Pop, but you're as brave as your mother." But standing in the kitchen, Oli shook the memory away. Her dad had gotten Bernie, their wood stove, going, and the fire crackled and pinged behind the stove's glass door. The hallway and the stairs had been cold, but the kitchen was warm. A big pot of oatmeal steamed on the stove, and 3 nice crackling brown loaves sat on the counter. Dad must have kept on baking after the garlic bread. Maybe he'd baked all night, waiting for Oli to come down. Oli decided not to think about that. She wasn't going to feel bad about that. Think about breakfast. Toast? Oli decided on oatmeal. She got herself a bowl and she crumbled bacon into the oatmeal and then dumped a lot of cream and maple syrup on top. Oli had helped tap the trees for the syrup herself the winter before. This was the last batch of syrup that they had all made together. Mom and her tapping, and her dad keeping the big pot boiling for days on end. Don't think about that either. Oli put her oatmeal on the kitchen island and she went to pour herself some coffee. "You're too young for coffee," said her dad, not looking up. He was sitting at the kitchen table and scrolling through the news. "I'm not too young to go out in the rain and catch pneumonia," said Oli, pouring herself a cup of coffee anyway and stirring in sugar. Her dad looked up. He wasn't eating his own oatmeal. "We'll take more oatmeal then," he said, catching sight of her bowl. "And there's raisins and walnuts in the jar on the spice shelf. You must be starving. You didn't come down last night." So he had waited up. Oli definitely felt bad now. Guilty, and also because she really was hungry. Oli added some raisins and a pat of butter to her oatmeal and gave the whole mess a stir. "Are you ready for the farm?" her dad said. "Like yesterday." I was talking to Misty Valley. I was talking about Misty Valley with Mr. Brewster. Linda Webster's only been in business for 5 years, but she's really doing well for herself, and the farm's revitalized the county. I'm a bit jealous that you get to see it all firsthand. Do you think I could join the 6th grade and come along?" "Only if you practice your drowned rat impressions," said Oli, with a dark look at the steaming window. She added warm milk to her coffee, and she brought her mug and her refreshed bowl of oatmeal over to the table. Her dad snorted, and he glanced at the rain that was slicing down the windows. "Well, there is that. Why don't you bring a hat? I'll have the stove going when you come back." "Hot chocolate?" Oli suggested. "With marshmallows," said her dad, and he smiled a smile that went all the way to the crinkles on either side of his eyes. It was a smile that she didn't see very much anymore. Oli almost smiled back. Maybe getting wet wouldn't be so bad. She took a big sip of her coffee and she opened Small Spaces. She could feel her dad watching her over her book, but she didn't look. Looking would make her feel guilty all over again. So Ole forced her attention back to the book. White mist crept up from the creek. Softly it slipped towards Jonathan and standing tear-stained in the rain. A man walked out of the smoky dark. What did he look like? I asked Jonathan later. He smiled, Jonathan told me. He didn't tell me his name. I don't think he has a name. He had long fingers, long, thin fingers. Oh, I do remember the rest. I felt as though I had known him since the day I was born, and I felt the most indescribable horror at the sight of him. When the man spoke, his voice was gentle. I think you called me, he said to Jonathan while the rain streamed down all around him. No, said Jonathan, I called my brother. Your brother is gone, said the man, but I could bring him back for you, he smiled, for a price. Jonathan's knees shook, but he still stammered, What price? When I ask, you will come with me and do as I say, said the man. If you do, you will have your brother back. For how long? Jonathan asked. How long do I have to do what you say? The man's smile broadened. His eyes were dark as the river at midnight. Until the mist turns to rain, he said. Ole! Ole! Ole took a deep breath, blinking in the cozy firelit kitchen. She had thought it was dark as a rainy night on an old farm. Her dad looked from her to the book. Were you not listening at all? I was giving you a fantastic speech, too. A speech? Ole was still dazed. Yep, said her dad. The be good today, stay dry, I love you speech? It was in the manual somewhere. Ole just blinked at him. Her dad sighed. Okay, he said. How about this instead? He thought for a minute. What did the frog say about the book? Don't know, said Ole distractedly, still thinking about small spaces. Read it, said her father, making frog noises. Read it, read it. Ole groaned. And then, what did the chicken say? Asked her dad, looking pleased with himself. Ole put her head in her hands. Book, 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 said her dad, making clucking sounds. Ole cracked a tiny smile. Come on, her dad said, taking the last swig of his coffee. I'll drive you. Hurry. Ole finished her own coffee. She swiped her spoon through the last of her oatmeal, and she followed her dad out into the rain. And that's the end of chapter number 4. Next time we meet, we will start chapter number 5, where Ole's going to go to school, stop by the principal's office, and then go on a field trip to the farm. Join me next time.